Okay, hello everyone. I'm Carolyn Waters. I'm the director and head librarian here at the New York Society Library. Welcome to everyone. There's a lot of new faces in the crowd, which is fantastic. So if this is your first time here at the New York Society Library, we are the oldest library and cultural institution in New York City, founded in 1754. Our mission has not changed in 271 years. We are here to connect books and people, and that's what we're doing tonight too. We've had a long history of being a haven for writers, supporting writer services, and it gives us great pleasure to collaborate with the Authors Guild and Diana Altman and Nancy Newman to bring this program to you tonight. So we're really thrilled to have you here. I do want to mention we do have books for sale by the authors tonight. So if you would like to, please do purchase some books courtesy of the corner bookstore, our local independent bookstore. So with that, I hand the podium over to Diana.
As Carol just said, I'm Diana Altman, an Authors Guild ambassador, and what that means is that I'm responsible for creating programs for our members. Tonight is a good example of a collaboration between the Authors Guild members, because Nancy's a member also, and this panel was her idea. She got all the people together. So as far as I'm concerned, all credit goes to Nancy. I'm always open for suggestions. If anybody has a suggestion about what they would like to see us do. We had a wonderful literary tour of Greenwich Village. We've had a panel about writing and selling short stories. Another one about how to use the media to help you promote your books. So there are various membership levels for the Authors Guild. The price is around $149 a year. And then you get to be able to use the forum, which comes out every morning. And all of the various authors write things that are mostly the matter. And it'll be the matter with you too. So you can, you get a lot of hints from that. So if you have any ideas for programs that you would like to see us do, tell me after the program. And welcome. I'm so happy to see you all. And if you have any questions about the Authors Guild, ask me about that, and have a good time tonight. Thank you for coming.
Very happy you came to help me explore this subject of the journey books take from the page to the screen. It's something that fascinates me, and we are really lucky to have a very accomplished and experienced group of panelists tonight who are going to share their experience with you. Meg Wolitzer down there. A celebrated author who's had 3 of her best-selling novels made into films. This Is My Life, Surrender Dorothy, and The Wife. She's also the host of the radio show and podcast Selected Shorts. Alix Strauss. Alix is a culture and lifestyle journalist and an author who turns her sharp eye on the quirks of human behavior. And her book, The Joy of Funerals, is currently being developed for a TV series. So, and as I told her, I live near Frank Campbell, and now that I've read the book, I think of her every morning. It's actually book, but on the production side, we have Carol Fenelon, very talented producer and music supervisor who's been involved in numerous book-to-screen projects such as Wonder Boys, In Her Shoes, The Big Year, and Too Big to Fail. And rounding out our panel is our literary agent, Vicky Bijur, who has Vicky has guided countless authors through the publishing process and onto the screen in projects such as the feature films Still Alice, Drive, The Man Who Knew Infinity, and the TV miniseries Lady in the Lake. So we have a really, really experienced panel. And my first question is, how do the sales commonly happen? Do studios go out shopping aggressively for books, or do agents and authors have contacts and it happens that way? So I am going to ask Meg and Alix just to explain how their movies came about.
There's a tremendous amount of praying and begging. And I think some luck too. Joy of Funerals, the novel, is in its 20th anniversary. And I think I was very early to market when it first came out. And I don't think everybody got it, or it was a little sharp for some people. We're in a completely different space now, and they're streaming, and it's been far more digestible. And back then, all you really had was 1600 and Sex in the City, which has been compared to, which is certainly, I'll take that. But here we are 20 years later, and in the reissue, we're in a different place. And so people have been more open to it, and it got a second life, no pun intended.
Well, my novel, The Wife, which was made into the film with Glenn Close, which maybe some of you saw, took 14 years to get made. And I think sometimes, and Vicky can certainly speak to this, it just takes, it's a labor of love to get these things made, and you all can speak to this, really. You know, we had a studio and then they fell away, but the big thing with The Wife was that we couldn't get a male star, and at the time they really wanted a male star to anchor the movie to get it made. There was no man American actor who could play a jerk in a movie called The Wife. So it was like a double insult to have to be a jerk and be overshadowed. But nobody gave up. And I think, you know, things go into kind of fallow periods, like they lie still for a while and then they sort of come back. And this sort of kept coming back, and the screenwriter, Jane Anderson, who was just wonderful, and who wrote Olive Kitteridge for HBO and won the Emmy for that, was always attached, and we were always friendly over the years. And when it happened really fast. You know, there's that great Grace Paley quote, the title of hers, Enormous Changes at the Last Minute. And I think sometimes films get made that way. So I can talk a little more about how that happened a bit later if anyone's interested, but that's.
Can I ask you about Nora Ephron?
Sure, yeah, so my movie, This Is My Life, was the first film that Nora Ephron directed. And that was a wonderful experience. It would be really hard for that to be a studio movie today, but 20th Century Fox put it out. Back in the day, it came out in 1992, starring Julie Kavner as a stand-up comic and her two daughters, Samantha Mathis and Gary Hoffman. It's just a wonderful movie, and in fact, I met Tom Hanks much later, and he said that he chose to do Sleepless in Seattle because he'd seen that film. You know, Nora and her sister Delia wrote it together, and it was about sisters and about a mother in showbiz, and they had all of that sort of in common. And they too just had to really pound the pavement to get that made, and they did. It made no money, but you know, we all really loved it, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. And in fact, not long before, near the end of Nora's life, there was an evening of films based on best movies about girls, really, and at BAM, and we went to see it together, and we hadn't seen it in a long time, and seeing, you know, when you see something of your own that you haven't seen in a really long time, it just sort of takes on a different quality. And we saw it, it was just wonderful seeing it together with her. So.
Carol, your studios hunt up novels, how did that?
Well, I wasn't at a studio. So.
Right, you were the producing,
Well,
so
producers have their own, you know, shingles, is the Hollywood term. Some of them are associated with studios, but some of us are independent. And that's not an independent studio, that's just an independent producer, right? We option our own material most of the time. We're avid readers, so we would read a lot. And we would talk a lot, and my partner had been my best friend for 20, 30 years. His father was an English teacher, so he'd been raised in a family that read a lot. And we had certain types that we shared a lot of interest in the type of literature we were interested in. And he was a director, so when we were optioning material, we were optioning material that he would then want to direct. He was also a screenwriter, and occasionally he would also want to do the adaptation. But most of the time, because he was an element that had become very valued in Hollywood, he, as a director, he had become very prominent and he had cachet. We would option the material and then we would take it to the studio and say, we would like you to finance this movie with Curtis directing and so writing. And we would often already have an actor attached at that point. So we were taking in a package. And then that gave us the opportunity to have more creative control over the ultimate movie that was made. So that was the general idea.
And Vicky, same for you, when you represented someone, did you always shop, try to?
Oh, well, yes, and getting a movie made, as everyone knows, happens a million different ways. One, I have a client, Laura Whitman, and she did a book called Every Secret Thing. And I gave it to our elevator man to take upstairs because Frances McDormand lived upstairs. And Frances McDormand optioned it and it was made with Dakota Fanning, so that's one way. I wanted to address something Meg said, because it reminded me, I represent a biography of an Indian mathematical genius. His name was Ramanujan and the book was called The Man Who Knew Infinity. And it came out in 1991. And in 2004 or 5, a 27-year-old would-be writer-director named Matt Brown read the biography, fell madly in love, somehow found the author and said, I'm just desperate to option this. This was 2005. The film was not made didn't come out till 2015. And here's what happened. Matt Brown, the options are usually 18 months, say he optioned it year after year after year. And a director, friend of ours, said to me once, Vicky, that movie will never get made because it's about a young Indian. And there are no Indian actors who are known other than Ben Kingsley, who's much too old. And then Slumdog Millionaire came along and Dev Patel played Ramanujan. And there was a party when the film came out and after I left the party and I had several drinks and there was Dev Patel on West 14th Street waiting to go up and I said, we were waiting for you. You just don't know. And there's one other story about serendipity. I represent an estate, I can't tell you who, but it's an estate and there was a novel from the 1950s. And about 10 years ago, for some reason, it was reissued in Italy where it sold 200,000 copies in 6 months. It was a huge success, years and years after publication. And an Italian director read it because he was at home in Italy. And he gave it to a well-known actress who was a close friend and said, you would be great playing this character. The movie still hasn't been made and we hope it will be, but there's a lot of serendipity.
There's the begging, the luck, and the praying. I think also the world has changed. I think streaming, smartphones, independent folks who want to option things or are really out there and are passionate. It's very different than the big budget films. I think you have that opportunity now and we need a good agent, so I may talk to you later. That elevator ride, but that's really, you need people in your corner. They're really, for every story that you're hearing tonight, there's a million projects that are never gonna get made that have been optioned, the option ran out, or they were re-optioned, it never was made. And it really is about luck and timing and the begging and the pleading and hoping that your actor stays in and that, you know, there isn't a writer's strike. It's hard to believe films are even made.
Actually, that leads me to my next question, which is how this streaming platform, the way it's opened up now, has changed the business. Has it changed, and has it given you a lot more opportunity to?
Well, yes, there are all these streamers who want content.
Yeah.
So that I think there's sort of a tsunami of interest, and you just hope some of it gets made. And it's a totally, you have to really, I found, adjust your mindset. You know, instead of thinking feature film 2 hours long, you think, you know, can this be a multi-part thing that's either available to be seen all at once, or do you want it to, you know, go to HBO where it's dropped every Sunday? I mean, there are different decisions to be made.
I wanted to ask Alix and Meg, how involved you were, or were you at all involved? Once you had your book optioned, have you been involved at all in casting, script, in point of view?
Yeah, I like to be involved in all of that. It's the fun part. I mean, it's so exciting, because otherwise we're just sitting at home in our long t-shirts in the middle of the afternoon, you know? I mean, when a writer gets to go somewhere, it's like a dog being taken out for a ride. I will say a couple of things to that. Nora Ephron became a dear friend, and she and Delia, also a dear friend, were so generous even from the start. Nora invited me to casting sessions in her apartment. And we went to different comedy clubs to see stand-up comics, and they invited me along. And in fact, here was a kind of classic Nora joke. I was very pregnant at the time, and she invited me to this really fun evening one night that they were going to, and I was gonna miss the last of my childbirth classes. And she said, "Oh, just come, I'll tell you what they were gonna say." So I got really involved, but you want to kind of walk that very fine line. You don't want to be the niche writer that somebody has to babysit on the set and take to craft services. You know, you want to kind of keep yourself useful, pleasant, but not annoying in some way. So I've tried to do that, and I've had real relationships with all of these people. And in fact, just to quickly end this, I did have a show, another thing made with a streamer. My novel, The Interestings, was made as an Amazon pilot back in the beginning days of Amazon pilots when they crowdsourced them. And they had a big thing, and my stars, neither of them was on social media, Jessica Perret and Lauren Ambrose from 6 Feet Under. So we didn't get a big hit, and they made this, it was Mike Newell, the big director. It was like a very expensive, big, lavish pilot. It didn't get picked up. And then but they bought it, and then I didn't have access to it for a long time. So I sat there thinking, when I get it back, I want to do something with this. And I thought, I'm gonna go in a different direction. Because there's so much music in, I don't know if anybody here read the book, The Interestings, but I'm gonna have to ask the rest of you maybe. But I think it could be a musical, and I now have entered this. If you ever do a program here on that, I've entered the musical theater world because Sarah Bareilles and Sarah Rule have written it as a musical, and that's and that will happen. So that's incredibly thrilling. So even if something doesn't happen, you watch it go through, there are other forms that it can take later. And it's been really kind of exciting to me later in my career. And again, I'm trying to make myself friendly and not annoying to Sarah. And so far, I think it's working.
I would like to be as involved as possible in everything, whether it's ordering the craft service to hanging the lights. And yet this is probably the most removed I've been Joy of Funerals is, in this iteration, in the novel, is 8 short stories, then a novella that link the previous stories together. So you get to meet the same characters twice, on their own and then by the main narrator who goes to other people's funerals because she's lonely and needs to connect to people. I think the people who are doing the film at some point, it's like sending your children off to college. You know what college they're going to, but you don't know what they will be doing while they're at college. Mostly drinking and vomiting into a trash can, but and maybe going to a class or two. I know how I would love it shot. I think it's off and running on, you really have to get good at saying goodbye to something. I mean, I don't know how much you got, did you write? Did you write? You didn't write any?
No.
So I'm in the writer's room. I asked to be in the writer's room and I'll be producing as well. And I'll be ordering the craft service. So if they offered that to me, I would take it. I mean, it's it's your only opportunity. So yes, I hope I'm not annoying. I hope I'm not annoying now. So but that's also, everything is followed with if it gets made. A million things can happen, but I think they have real people who are the main writers and they will be spearheading this, and I will be, off to the side just nodding and being like,
Are they
that's
paying
great.
you? Are you?
Oh yes, I'm being paid for everything. Everything. I'll be paid for craft service if I could. I'm a freelancer. We want to be paid for everything, always. We're never paid for anything.
I actually cheated and I asked Carol before when I met her, I said, are writers considered nuisances or a good resource? So, I guess.
They're an excellent resource, because a lot of the research that takes place in writing the book becomes relevant in a different way when you make the movie. But unless they're being paid, typically they're not sitting there contributing to the writing process. Because it's very tricky and Hollywood is very, they have guilds and unions for those types of things. So, the writer works as a screenwriter. He works usually under the supervision of the film director. The film director might or might not be collaborating as a writer on the writing of the screenplay. But in all of the situations that I've been in, the original author gets the respect and adoration of the director and the writer, but there's also arm's distance during the initial process, and then usually the writer's more involved as things go along, just in terms of being included or consulted with about casting or locations and things like that. And it's really about as much as the writer wants to be involved. Many writers don't want to be involved. On LA Confidential, James Ellroy didn't want to have anything to do with the creative development of the transition of the novel into the screenplay. And then only when the screenplay was completed, Curtis and Brian Helgeland gave the screenplay to him. And he sent back a thing saying, great. That was it. But then he participated in other ways, especially in the marketing. He's such a character and, it's a personality. So he went to Cannes when they did the initial, premiere of the movie, and he traveled all around the world doing marketing with us, when we were doing the promotion of the movie. And that was great because he is the reason the movie was made. The movie doesn't exist without that novel. And, it was Curtis's movie, but it was James's novel, and the two of them were inextricably part of the project. So
Can you explain who Curtis Hanson is?
he was my producing partner, but he's also a director and a screenwriter, and he wrote and directed LA Confidential with a writing partner. And so all of the movies that I produced with him as his producing partner.
Vicky, do you write, when someone's book is optioned, do you write into the contract how involved they are, or is that something that gets decided, or?
Well, first of all, it depends on what the author wants to do, and some authors want nothing to do other than, they all want to visit the set. And they all do visit the set.
To get out of our writing.
But not all of them want to write at all. But And then sometimes they wanna write, but if the producer holds all the cards and doesn't want the novelist involved or the author of the book involved, there's nothing to be done. But sometimes the writer says, I really wanna write this, and he or she is given at least the first chance. There's no guarantee, I mean, not in my experience, that his or her screenplay will be used. I'm thinking.
I was just gonna ask you if any of your clients were actively
Well,
writing.
now, Laura Littman, I can mention this because it's been announced. Laura Littman, a series of her books has been optioned and she will be writing them with another novelist and screenwriter named Megan Abbott. They will be doing that.
Yeah.
But Laura was not interested in doing this before, but she is now interested.
Lady of the Lake.
Yeah, she did not write late, she visited the set, but that,
Is there a downside to having your book option that you can think, I can think of all the upsides to having a book option, I would ask Vicky if it's ever regretted in any way.
I think when you have to, as an agent or as an author, you have to be very careful to whom you're optioning a book, because someone could option the book and package it wrong, not, send it out to every producer in town without the right actor or without a director when it should be packaged with a director, and you could sort of, shoot your wad, and then those people won't wanna see the book again, they'll say, well, we already saw it and we said no. Whereas maybe they would have been more interested if somebody else had said, I see so-and-so in the role, or so-and-so is gonna write the screenplay. So it's not so much there's a downside to optioning, there can be a downside to optioning it to the wrong person.
And massive disappointment if you hate the movie.
Well, that's what I was
And
wondering
then the
about.
movie unfortunately can be seen by many, many more people than read the original book. And then people who never read the book think the book is the movie. So it depends, the author has to think about those things, when they're giving up those rights. Because generally they don't have a right of approval over the screenplay, they don't have a right of approval over casting. It's a film director's medium. Once it gets to the world of being made into a movie, the author is in a secondary role with them. And I think it must be very difficult because the author is the only person involved for all that time until the book gets published. It's their baby. And movies are made by 300 people. So there are a lot of voices that are having input, and the authors is one of those, but it's not controlled.
I don't wanna put Meg on the spot, but I won't ask you whatever made you unhappy about a movie. I'll ask you, did your image of some of your characters change because the interpretations in the movie were different than yours? I should say, how did it affect you? So I'm
When apparently, my husband reminded me recently that when This Is My Life came out, I did an interview, probably for NPR, in which I was asked, aren't you afraid of what they're gonna do to your book? Not them in particular, but whoever made it. And I said something like, my book's on the shelf. They're not doing anything to my book. The original text remains. You have to be able to let go or don't option it. And I do think it's important to like the work of the people you allow to, take it out there. In the case of Nora Ephron, I knew that I've been reading her for years, and I then saw When Harry Met Sally at some point along the process. But it was a good bet, that one. I'm very happy that we did it, even though it wasn't commercially successful. It was really meaningful for me. It was a great experience. With my book, The Wife, the book is very different from the film, and I don't know, is there anybody here who both read the film and read the book and saw the book? Okay, so so by the time we didn't get the big American actor, who went through the usual names, so we ended up getting fantastic Jonathan Pryce and Glenn Close. And they were just phenomenal. I got to go to the Academy Awards, although, you know, she lost to Olivia Colman. But it's an incredible experience. Again, I wouldn't trade it for anything. But the book and the film, and I don't know if you agree, are very different creatures. They really are. But I expected that too. We have a Swedish director. We have, you know, it's like it has a look of a sort of Swedish art film. And I wrote a piece for the Times. I think you could find it about how in the book it was about my character's voice. It's a kind of very, you know, pissed off first person, funny, angry book. And the film is about Glenn Close withholding. It's about her face. So that's something I hadn't really anticipated. But I had a lot of conversations with Glenn. You know, we became friends too, and you know, just got to know each other, sort of doing certain kinds of events that we did together. We did one of those New York Times talks together at the Times. And you know, it's just about what she's not saying. Whereas in a book, what you're not saying may not come across. So I learned a lot about how actors work. I was always asking her, how do you do that thing? Because it's such a different, you know, circuit that takes you from one place to another as an actor than a writer. So I've probably lost track of your question. I'm sure somewhere.
No, but how you reacted to the movie's positive.
Oh, I was really happy. I mean, it's just the acting was phenomenal. It was a very gripping film. I loved it. It's very different from the book. Both are true. You know, both can be true. And I expect it. It's like, what ride am I going to be on with my next one? Like, what will that be like? What I really want is that some kernel, some nucleus of truth, you know, some little hot place exists in the film version of a book that I read that has an overlap, a kind of Venn diagram overlap with what I was trying to do. And then they can go far afield, and I hope they will. They're interesting artists. So I've never been unhappy.
And Alix, yours is yet to come out.
Yeah, we're in pre-production or early development, I guess is the right terminology. I think I'm also in it for the ride. I think you step back and you say it's somebody else's interpretation now. And I think film or television is very fluid and they'll make any changes. You have to be ready to give up a lot. If you're not ready, then you shoot it yourself. And you know, if you think it took 20 years for somebody to option this, it's gonna take a really long time to shoot it yourself. So I couldn't be more excited to see what somebody else's, you know, interpretation or vision is going to be. And they're two very different entities. So, but you're right, I think there can be things that people think the writer wrote exactly what came out on screen and then nobody buys the book. And good news is you can buy them all here tonight. Get it while they're in its original form. So
When is the book target date for release?
oh, I think we're really early. I think you know, I'm in like the early pregnancy stage. I'm not even announcing. It's up to you guys because I feel to be connected.
I'm gonna ask you two something that all writers think about. Is there a type of book that is particularly suited for adaptation? Is there a genre, a theme? I mean, you know, you see so many films that are quite eccentric. I saw one recently, I won't mention it, but I think, how the hell did that get made? Who put their money in that? Is there a type, you've been doing it for a little bit, do you sort of say this in the back of your head when somebody?
I don't think like that, and every now and then I get a query letter from someone who wants me to look at their manuscript and they say, this would be a great film. And I think, don't think about the film, this has to work as a book first. It's, you know, there's a person known as a book to film agent, someone who takes the film rights.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and then finds a producer or a screenwriter or a studio or whatever. Those book to film agents have to have a really uncanny sense of, will this work? there was someone, a lovely man, and he worked at 20th Century Fox, and he wasn't a book to film agent, he was a scout. And his job was to scout books that might work as movies. And I remember he was the one who bought, it was a YA novel, young adult novel, was it The Truth in Our
Fault in Our
Stars?
Stars.
Pardon?
Fault in Our Stars.
The Fault in Our, about young people dying of cancer, which was a huge success.
What was the title? Say it again.
The Fault in Our Stars by John
John
Green. The Fault in Our Stars, and I believe it was a huge success. And I remember thinking, you know, not in a million years would I think that would work.
I can tell you why we put that in the query, because there's some books now that go right to film people and are optioned before it actually comes out. So that's the thinking, only because it's in my emails. Also for the mere reason too, that you hope that people will see the bigger picture, or that it's more commercial, or they're not really taking a chance on this project because it can have so many iterations where there's so much money to be made. And I have lots of friends, I have a number of friends who have books that have already been optioned before they're actually out, for sale or in publication. So it's a whole different shift now.
But I wouldn't, as a literary agent, I don't think.
You're thinking about the publishing,
Yes,
publishing. I didn't know there was a separate agent.
yeah,
Books to film.
and, you know, I gave you 3 stories about books that turned into film without a film agent, but a lot of books turned into films because the film agent says, oh, this would be perfect for such and such studio or such and such director or.
Carol, having produced, what's the biggest challenge in producing? Is that too wide a question? What are some of the challenges, I'll say, when you're producing? Is it getting the money up? Is it putting the
Getting the film made.
Getting the film.
I mean, it's, you know, and it's everything from start to finish, so it's picking the right material. It's making sure that you're partnering up with the right studio or financing partner. It's about when you're working with someone who's really good at what they do in terms of the creative side of the filmmaking, it's protecting their back and making sure that nobody ever has the right to go in and start pushing them around and telling them what to do. I mean, there are provisions in contracts with directors, for example, if they go a certain amount over budget in the production of the movie, the studio then gets more creative control of the movie. You know, there's certain directors have creative control, so they have the right to final edit, which means the studio can't come in and re-edit them. If they once they get to the point where they say the film is done, the studio can argue and they can threaten to do things in order to try and persuade you. But they don't have the right to literally take the film away and start editing it themselves. You know, Harvey Weinstein, one of the reasons why he was hated in Hollywood before he was hated for being a misogynist womanizer was the fact that he would take directors' work and then he would edit it himself in the editing room. He was called Harvey Scissorhands. Yeah, so my partner had final edit. So my job was to make sure during production, for example, we never went over budget, because that would then immediately throw him into a situation where his creative control was compromised. So there are all these things going on behind the scenes in terms of what you're doing. But I think the job, which is a difficult one, is to get along with the studio when they're can be playing, you know, nasty hardball with you, and you have to get along, and you also have to protect the people you're working with so that they're not having to listen to all the, you know, the nagging doubt all the time. And I think that's probably the biggest job that I have from an interpersonal point of view. But picking the right material is the first decision and ultimately the most important decision that you have to make. So and in terms of this whole issue of selecting and how do you select, that is a personal decision. And if you're working with someone who's going to be the creative head of the project, you want passion in your director for the material. If studios buy books because they think there's commercial upside. That studios are driven by money. They want to make more money. Studios are not driven by, wanting to be inspirational or be particularly creative or artistic. They want to put movies in the marketplace that are going to give them a return on their investment, that's going to enable them to make more movies and put those in the marketplace. They have stockholders. They answer to their stockholders. This is a commercial enterprise. What we do, what the independent people do, is they make things that they want to be proud of. They're making works of art. They think about cinema as an artistic endeavor. And they're salaried people. We make a salary. We do have profit interests when you get to a certain level of success in the business, but you're really doing it out of a love for cinema. And those two things butt heads. But when studios are buying books, I think you have to be wary about that, because LA Confidential, as an example, was bought by Warner Brothers. They talked to a few people about, making the movie. They ultimately decided that there were 20 different plot lines in the book, and the book was unmakeable, and why did we ever buy this stupid novel to begin with? So then they put it on a shelf back in a room where all the books go that, are gonna die an ugly death. And then ultimately Curtis read the book 5 years later and said, I really wanna make this thing. And so he went in and made the pitch. And they still didn't wanna make it and have enough confidence in it until he went out with the young executive who worked at Warner Brothers, who really believed in the project too. They went out and got Arnold Meshon to put up all the money. And so Warner Brothers distributed the movie, but the movie was actually financed by someone else who believed in Curtis's vision for the film that he wanted to make. But he had to strip out 16 plot lines and reduce it down to 3. And that was how the movie ended up being makeable. Books that are 600 pages can't be made as a 600-page book, or you would have a series that would go on for 4 or 5 years. That's the only way you can do it.
How has the fact that the movie business now is in the crapper kind of? How is that? Sorry. But I mean, seems to be really struggling, and as few movies as were being made, I understand that fewer are being made. Is that true? Is there hope? I mean, I love movies so much.
I love old movies. I love all movies. I watch movies that go all the way back to the 20s. I have watched I know the history of the film business. I think there are certain eras when we made better movies than we made in other eras. And I think that the 70s is a really good example of amazing movies being made in the 70s. But those were independent movies that were being made by independently financed. They were not studio creations. And I think that there was a period during the 90s where that then was revived, and we had a lot of Miramax was huge in the 90s. They made movie after movie that won Academy Awards, and that was a small little company that was making, that was financing on its own those movies that were being made. And I think what's going to happen now is that we're starting to see A24 is the company that bought Alix's book. There are, especially in New York, where independent filmmaking is still really successful. I think those companies are going to end up being the major producers of the best films, and the more they make good films and profitable films, the more people are going to put money into those companies, and they're going to continue to do that. I think the era of the big studio is on a downhill slope. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Because they were able to just churn out a lot of movies, and this way we're gonna get fewer better, do you think?
No, I just think I think they're driven to make money. And I don't think that when art is about making money, art's any good.
But isn't,
that's not always the truth, but I think that,
but I mean, if you're dealing with publishing companies, businesses, the point of the business is making money. Unless,
a business, yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is that I think like studio executives, they work for a company.
okay.
Directors don't work for a company, they work for themselves. It used to be the studios used to have all those directors and all those actors and actresses under contract. So you'd watch a Warner Brothers movie and they were always the same actors and the same directors and the same editors and costume designers, because they're all under contract to Warner's. That system went away in the 50s, 60s, it's not ever come back. So when you are making a movie and you want a director, you go to their agent and you ask, will they direct this movie? And then you make a deal for that one movie. And that's a different scenario. And I'm just saying, anybody can go to those directors and ask them to direct, and the director's gonna wanna direct the movie for whoever is going to give them the most creative control over the project.
Right. I mean, Vicky, you must be walking a tightrope also between things you think are literary and you have to sell them to someone who wants to
Yes.
make a profit. So-
Well, I always say, publishing is completely marketing driven. You have to be able to envision a large enough audience for a book, you have to know how to reach that audience, how to market the book to the audience. When I take on a project, I have to think about the editor of the publishing house and her job selling the book to the sales department and to the publicity people and the marketing people, and it's totally marketing driven. They're beautiful books, but if you can't envision an audience, and you know, the caveat is this is all totally personal and subjective, and there's no, I would never say to someone this is unpublishable because another agent might be able to envision something that I don't see, but yes.
You wouldn't want the writer to jump out the window.
Right, but also,
Yeah.
it's not true, you just can't, you don't say that because we all have stories of something we turned down that somebody else took on, but I also say publishing is completely marketing.
Yeah, remember. All right, I want to ask one last question before I open it up to questions. Do you have any advice for authors who are thinking or hoping to get their own books? And I want to ask all of you, any advice to?
Well, I guess we're talking about people who have agents already, or, I mean,
I don't
not,
know,
or
it's being
because,
streamed to the Authors Guild, to thousands of people, and I'm not sure. So,
okay, well, I mean, I'll give a two-part answer then.
Good.
I think that, you know, I teach writing a lot, and I think that if you have something you really want to say and you work hard, revision is everything. Revision is everything. Really will change you. You can become better as a writer. Your work can become stronger. And you need to just get it into the right hands. That's true on the level of probably finding the right agent, and then the agent finding the right editor, and then perhaps the book to movie agent finding the right people for, you know, to look at it. It can take a really long time. It is not for the faint of heart. One thing that I have found in terms of why I've had most of my books, I think all of my books have been optioned at least that have come close-ish, and then, you know, so 3 plus the pilot have gotten made for, you know, it's a pretty good track record, I think. But I think it may have to do with the fact that they all have big characters in them. You know, I don't know if they're character driven, but the characters sort of dominate. I'm never that interested in plot particularly. So the plot may get enhanced a little bit by the filmmakers because that's not something that I tend to spend a lot of time on. But I guess I would say if you know, find if you're looking for an agent, see who are your favorite writers and find out who represents those writers. Start there. Start with affinities, right? With things that are like you know, like the stuff that you like to do, or at least in the same wheelhouse. What's a book you love? Who represents that book? And then take it from there. But it's not an overnight thing. It's a very, very long thing. It's like doing a weird craft, like some old, like scrimshaw. Like, you know, being an artist has that thing that is things. And then getting something to, but if you have a good agent, your agent will connect you with a Hollywood agent, you know, and I have my agent she knows the kind of people I would want to make films or television shows based on my work, and she would make those connections, because ideally the people you work with will know you and what you care about and what kind of what kind of person you want to be in business with. So it's a long process, but it can be really, really gratifying. I would say that.
I think it's like dating, and you can be swiping a lot and you have no idea if somebody is swiping back. And still being single, it can take forever to find, you know, the person that you think you're supposed to be with, or once you think you found the person you're supposed to be with, and it turns out he's not so much the person you're supposed to be with, and you have to start all over. I'm also a big fan of you're your own best investment. So I think if you can do one thing for yourself every day, let's say you still have a full-time job and you're writing on the side, you've got to find time to do it. You have to have something to send out. So if you're not writing, then that's part of the problem. Make time to write. But if you have the manuscript, send it out to 5 agents every day, or 5 agents a week, or do something that propels you forward. And then once you get really good at mastering one thing a day, you move to 2. So, I mean, I'm as scrappy as they come. So I really, and I don't love the hustle, but you know, if you told me to take off your shirt and you'll sell all your books, the shirt would come off. I'll take it off now. So I think you also just have to be out there. You've got to put yourself, we're in this amazing moment of really make your own career. Every knucklehead on TikTok, no offense to the talkers, every influencer who was once an influencer, who's still an influencer, the micro influencers, the people with the sponsorship, and it is all about marketing, and it is unfortunately all about numbers, and it used to be about passion, but we're also in an arena where Judy can hang the lights and Andy can build the stage and Liza can do the makeup, and it's exciting. I think writing is so tangible. Do you feel it's super? A book is forever. I mean, when speaking of the joy of funerals, when you die, it's still there. So there is something very tangible. I love books. I didn't love books as a child. I love the tangibility. So this is a very rah moment. I think it's a hard industry, but it's one of those few, you just heard somebody went upstairs to, you know, knock on what's your name's door and she decided to buy it. I mean, it's extraordinary. That never happens, but it happens. Yeah.
I actually was just reminded of something. So Vicky, you used to live in the same building with my friend Kathleen Shine, and a wonderful writer whose books are in this library. And Kathy told me, I guess when she started writing, she had young children, and she wrote 1 page a day. And at the end of a year, she had a book. So really, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. It's truly can be bespoke. People with full-time jobs who have other things, you know, just find a little time that is inviolable. This time is, you know, and explore that. So she found a really good way to do it.
So I'm gonna approach this question differently. Okay, needless to say. I'm going to assume that you are a writer and you have many options for people who want to buy your book. And you're trying to make a decision about who to sell your book to. And I think approaching it this way, I'm going to also say that you can reverse engineer this response and say, who should you be trying to sell your book to, all right? But I think that the first thing you look for is, do you want to be in business with a studio? Or do you want to be in business with a filmmaker? Now, filmmaker can be an actor who wants to produce and put together their own project because they're not happy with the opportunities that they're being given. It could be a producer who's an independent producer, somebody like Brian Grazer, for example, who's been in the business for a very long time and made some remarkably terrific movies. There are a lot of those producers out there. There can be someone who's linked up with a director, or it could be someone who just produces and puts together and packages each project separately. It could be a director, it could be a screenwriter who is very well connected and has great credits and can walk into a studio and get them to finance their script. I think I would go with that over a studio because Studios go on to the next shiny penny very quickly. People who put up their own money to buy book rights are going to be passionate enough to do that. They're not going to do it with someone else's money. They're doing it with their money. And they don't do it willy-nilly. And I think that you want to have somebody who's got skin in the game. I also think you want to be able to sit down across the table from a human being who's going to make your movie and say to them, so what did you like about my book? And if they can't answer that question in a way that makes you happy, you should really be smiling a lot and not be selling your book. You want to get along with that person, but you don't ever want to have a conversation about selling your book to them again. If someone hasn't done their homework, read your book, knows why they want to make the movie, can give you an approach to how they're going to adapt the book, because they have to take your book and they have to distill it down into a 120-page script. You want to know what's your idea about how you're going to do that. They don't have to be committed to it, but they should be able to give you a pitch about it when they're sitting there across the table from you. You might want to say, what do you see in the part of so-and-so or this or that? Because if they've read the book and they're a director, they've already seen those roles being played by actors they know. They're envisioning that as they're reading your book. They're thinking about what scenes they're going to have delight in shooting and how they're going to shoot them. Where are they going to shoot it, in the city that you set your book in, or are they thinking about shooting it somewhere else? These are questions you want to ask. And I think you sometimes only get one shot. I think it's great when people can get a reversion of their rights to come back to them, but once somebody's put up the money and it hasn't happened, it's going to be, you're going to go from having a 10% chance of having your book made into a movie to having a 0.5% chance. So you better pick the right one the first time around. And so I just don't think, I think you should be, you have to be the babysitter of your novel. You have to be the caretaker of your novel. And you have to make sure that you're handing it over to someone who's going to treat it with as much respect as you put into loving it and caring for it when you wrote it. So that's my pitch. Okay.
And Vicky, do you have any advice? The hard question, really. And by the way, while Vicky's thinking, I want to say many novelists would be crawling across the floor to the desk to sign up to get something optioned. You know, it's,
I think my advice has to do with the contract and making sure that you can get the best agreement you can get, and that you have somebody very experienced and professional looking at the contract before you sign it.
good, good. All right, do we have any questions?
Do I need to use a mic for the people on?
Just speak loudly if you don't mind.
Speak loud. I'll repeat it if.
Okay.
Stand up. Stand up.
Oh, okay, I'll stand up. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed what you were talking about. My question is more so for Carol and potentially for Vicky. Because I'm curious to know your thoughts from a nonfiction side, because we've been talking about fiction and novels. And I'm thinking about the types of books that tend to get made on the nonfiction side will be like a memoir, right? So it'll be like Malcolm X, today's his 100th birthday today, or it will be, 12 Years a Slave, still another memoir, right? Even if you look at a book like Caste, instead of talking about the story of Caste, then the whole film became about Isabel Wilkerson. So I'm just curious to know, what are your thoughts about books that are, adapted from nonfiction to the screen? Like if somebody did, I don't know, like King Leopold's Ghost or something like that.
We loved working with nonfiction material. We optioned 3 or 4 nonfiction narrative books. 3 of the 4 were made into movies. So the one that didn't make it was a book that was my personal favorite, actually. But it was a book called Word Freak, and I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. It was a very obscure book written by a guy who used to be That's it. And I loved him, and he was terrific. And I heard him talking about his book on NPR one day. He was the sports commentator on NPR. And immediately raced back to the office, called the agent and said, call up and option this book. And we had Jack Black attached to be one of the Scrabble crazy, crazy Scrabble guys who was competing for. We love the idea of dealing with competition. I'm giving you this example because it's Stefan's memoir of taking a year off from NPR to become a professional Scrabble player. And there's not a lot of money, but there is a lot of ego satisfaction. If you become the national Scrabble champion, this is a big deal. And we had another book that was similar where the competition, it was written by a journalist called Mark O'Masick, I think. And it was called The Big Year and A Year in the Life of Birding. And so these were all birders all over the country who every year, summer, most of them, would try and be the person who saw the most birds that year. And it was, I think it's in the North American continent. And we thought this would make the most amazing book and my movie. And we had a whole, you get a vision in your head for it. And oddly, because I thought this was going to be another word freak, Ben Stiller and his partner read the book at the same time we did, and they want to do it. So we all teamed up together to make the movie. And those are examples of, we had passion for competition, showing the extraordinary ways in which competition drives people to do things, even when there's not a payoff at the end of the road. So this is just an odd little obscure thing that we were excited about as two, kooky people. And in both cases, one of them was made into a movie with some pretty big stars. The movie didn't do great at the box office, but it got made. That was an accomplishment. To make a movie about bird watching is an accomplishment. And then we also made a nonfiction based on a nonfiction narrative book about financial crisis too big to fail. And that was a little more topical and of a little more broader interest to people in this country. And but that was also, we love working with nonfiction material. There's so much detail in it. There's so much, there's a sense of time and place and characters. And when you've got journalists writing the book, they know how to talk about people and show the complexities of all the people. There's really no difference between making a movie out of nonfiction material in certain ways. You have to find the plot. You have to find the emotional gotcha at the end, for your audience. But you're telling a story. And at the end of the day, that's what movies are. They tell stories. And more people that are writing in the nonfiction world are telling just terrific stories, so I applaud that.
Right, we have another question? We have two over there.
So Carol, I just love Wonder Boys. I've seen it 12 times. When my kid got into the law school, he got into Carnegie Law, and I said, we have to go to Carnegie Law. I was like, we'll see the house. So you very inspirational in that arc of your story about artistry. First of all, did Curtis get to see the success of Wonder Boys? It's a cult classic now.
Oh, yeah, no, he was aware that was a beloved movie. It wasn't a huge financial success as a studio film. The studio didn't consider it to be, it made its money back, but it didn't make them a lot of profit.
It's a success to many writers.
Yeah, and I think the studio, to their credit, released the movie with crappy marketing the first time around, but the critics really loved it. There were critics who really championed the movie. So because of that, they gave it another shot. They actually re-released the movie 6 months later, and put a different marketing campaign behind it. It still didn't do much business, you can't put a movie out there twice.
In that story, could you tell us if it's appropriate, like a point where, was it Michael Chabon that you guys?
I have to cut you off. I'm sure you have some questions for the other.
I'll talk to you.
Yes.
Hi, first of all, I appreciate this very much, and thank you. You said towards the end that only 10% of movies which are optioned, or works which are optioned, have movies, and even less that you have to wait for the rights to return to you. How do you avoid being in the other 90%?
You have to pick the right person to buy your book. And you have to have an enormous amount of luck. You know, it's not skill, really, it's a gut thing, it's intuition and luck, you know, but the biggest decision that you're gonna make, the only decision you're gonna have 100% control over is who are you gonna sell your rights to? You know, there are ways that, I mean, Vicky knows this, I'm sure Alix and Meg know this too, the more power you have as an author, you can arrange to get rights back if they don't move forward and make the movie. The problem is that the normal way that happens is that you have to pay them back not only the cost of optioning your book to begin with, you have to also pay them back all the costs they put into developing the project before they decided not to make it. Now, there are people with certain, you know, who, when there's enough enthusiasm about the project, you can go further than that and tell them you're not gonna pay them, you know, reimburse them costs. But it creates impediments. And if the likelihood of you ever getting the rights back and getting a second bite at the apple are very low in general.
I've got a couple of questions from the live stream, if I may.
Okay.
Can the panel address the idea of a free but short-term option, for instance, 6 months, versus optioning for a few $1,000s, but one that lasts 18 to 24 months and is potentially renewable even longer?
Yes, there's a new thing called a shopping agreement. And I've done some, and there's supposed to be a benefit in that you're not locking your author into a certain a back-end purchase price, because you're not discussing that in the shopping agreement. The shopping agreement basically says you've got the right to try and get this movie made in the next 6 months. You try and make it as short as possible. And then if it does get picked up, then you start the negotiation about how much somebody will pay for it, etc. And you start all the other negotiations. And people seem to be doing a lot of shopping agreements, and I've done some, and it's, you know, you have to make a decision. What is the sort of opportunity cost? Could someone else come along tomorrow after we've signed this thing and offer us a huge amount of money to option it? So you have to think, is this, you often do a shopping agreement when it's a bit of a long shot.
And advice for someone who wants to learn how to adapt books to the screen, starting at the beginning of the process. How do I find out if a book has been optioned?
You can usually call the publisher that's on the, you know, that's in the book itself. It'll tell you who the publisher is. You can call and they'll put you through to the right department and they'll tell you whether anyone's optioned.
And there may also be something called the Rights Center. It seems to me they now have some kind of central data bank where they keep track.
Thank you.
Laura, I can't help but notice that there's a lot of.
You talk louder.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't help but notice there's a lot of women on the panel. And I wonder about that because as a long-term reader and moviegoer, I see those ups and downs with women's careers in movies and getting books published. I'm not asking so much as a prediction for the future, but I wonder, are women's stories right now very important and people responding to them, independents or studios, or what's happening? Or is there longevity for women?
I don't think of stories as being women's stories or men's stories. I think of stories as good stories or bad stories. Good stories meaning good stories to make movies out of, or stories that aren't good to make movies out of. But I don't really think of them as, I don't characterize them as gender or color or culture so much.
I love that we're all women, I mean, I just think it's fantastic. I think that there's always women's stories out there, and I think that they're just as commercial, and just as successful as men's, or however someone is identifying. I think it is about the passion, it is about the material, it is about the story. But I would love to think that You know, who doesn't wanna hear a woman's story? Unless you don't. But I'm all for, you know, the women's stories, yeah, we don't get paid enough, we're having a hard year, bring on the women. Unless, no, we don't, our side is good.
I've got male authors as well as female authors, and at the moment, I think 3 of my male authors have things being negotiated for film, so I may be a woman, but that doesn't mean I represent women.
This happens to be my choice of a panel. So it was my interest, and there's a question back there.
For authors who have sold that first option, what advice do you have for them selling the second one? Is it momentum? Can we blow it? Do you have to try just as hard for number 2 as you did for number 1?
I think momentum is super important because everything is about commercial and how valuable, not you are, but how valuable the work is. And if other people are interested in something, then, you know, it is momentum. So I would capitalize if you've just had something optioned, that's like your second sentence in the letter that says, hi, I'm so-and-so. My current project has been optioned. I have this other project that I think would be just as great. I'm wondering if you're interested in it. Everybody wants you when everybody else wants you. It goes back to dating.
Yes?
Yes, does your advice extend to making a documentary instead of film?
Yeah, it would extend to anything. I think if you have a moment, if you're having a moment, capitalize on that moment. How else do you add? How else do you build? How else do you create? Not only your legacy, but all the things that you're capitalizing on. So yes, I think if this is your moment, absolutely.
Yeah, I wrote a tour book about East Harlem because years ago they made a film Walk Through Harlem on Channel 13, but they left out East Harlem. And just published a book about touring East Harlem. That's what I meant. So you wanna like do a documentary about the one section of Harlem that was left out.
But that's a terrific pitch.
Sure,
I mean, that's
that's what I meant about.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think we're at questions,
Great.
and I want to really thank you all. We've had a